we may have some more available, or these may be.
Something I can drop down to
Betty Kemp.
Betty Kemp?
Betty Kemp.
Really? Okay. All right.
And
All
the
right.
other thing quickly, just to give them kudos because they may not mention it, we have the apothecary that came out of the original Ritzman's Pharmacy on Main Street.
126 Main, right.
126 Main. That's in the house, been refinished. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to go in and check it out. It's absolutely a piece of artwork.
Right.
So, anyway.
All right.
Go ahead, guys.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. Yeah. And Eric and I certainly appreciate the opportunity to come tonight and give you a little history of where Ritzman Pharmacy originated, its history in Wadsworth, and how it grew from here. Ritzman Pharmacy started with the birth of our father, Forrest, in Copley on July 30th, 1906. And he was raised on a farm there in Copley for a while until they moved then to Kenmore, where he went to high school, where he worked in McDowell's Pharmacy, I believe, in high school on Kenmore Boulevard. And then when he decided that he wanted to be a pharmacist, he went to Ohio Northern University. And you'll see a photograph, and you're welcome to look at his actual diploma that we found in the office. And that diploma is dated 1926. He would have been 19 and a half years old when he graduated. He was the last class, I think we found out, Eric, in the history that we just read about Ohio Northern's pharmacy school that could get their pharmacy degree in 2 years. So anybody that entered after 1924 had to go 3 years. Well, Dad got his pharmacy degree in 2 years. At that time then, and there's just a photograph, and you're welcome to look at it more closely. It was from, I think, May of 1926. This is a picture of Dad after he graduated from Ohio Northern University Pharmacy School. He worked in about 3 different pharmacies in downtown Akron. I think he worked at the Portage Hotel Pharmacy, and I don't know, he worked at another pharmacy, and then the last pharmacy he worked at in downtown Akron was the Ohio Pharmacy, and I think he was a part owner in that, in the Ohio building at the Ohio Pharmacy, and he was a part owner there. In the late 20s, and here's what we'll go back here a minute. In the late 20s, our mother, who had been born in eastern Indiana, in Bluffton, Indiana, came to Barberton, Ohio, to work as a nanny for the Austins, who were the owners then of the O.C. Barber estate. And she worked as a nanny for them because the bank that she had worked at in Indiana had failed. She had worked at a feed store, she worked at the bank. They were looking for somebody to replace a nanny, and so that's how Mom got to Barberton area. Well, her and Dad met at the Apostolic Church in Akron in the late 20s, and then were married in, what was it, 1930, in April of or January or something of 1930. So that...
You forgot to tell them,
Oh.
when Mom was coming on the train from Indiana, from near Fort Wayne, all the way through western Ohio, which is flat as a pancake, got to Mansfield, she said, "I thought I was in the mountains."
Right.
She had never seen hills like that.
Yeah, that's right. But thanks, Eric. Yeah.
Eastern Indiana and western Ohio, you know, are just flat as a tabletop.
Yeah. So Mom and Dad were married in 30, and then they lived in Kenmore. And then as the Depression got worse at that time, our sisters tell the story about Dad was working downtown Akron, and so for a couple years they put the car up on blocks, put it in a garage, and he rode the streetcar back and forth to work. Well, sometimes in the 30s then, they decided that they're going to move from Kenmore. They lived on Indian Trail, and they moved and bought a house in Norton, in just a mile west of Loyal Oak on Route 261 on Clubside Drive. So that would have been in the mid-30s. The oldest child, Walter, was born in 1932, and then our sister Mary Ann was born in 33. A year and a half later. Then the next sister, Martha, was born in 35, and then Earl was born in 37. So those were there were 4 children there from 32 to 37, and then there was a little hiatus until our brother Bob was born in 1942, and then in 1945, our brother Paul, who, by the way, and somebody mentioned, he was the only brother of the 5 of us who didn't become a pharmacist. He did go to pharmacy school at Northern for 2 of the 3 quarters of the first year and did well, but it just was not for him. He was more of a mechanic. He was more of a hands-on, outside type guy, and it really, he agonized over telling Mom and Dad that he didn't want to continue. And Mom's reply to him is that you got to be happy at what you do, so there was no pressure for him to continue, that I recall. And so that Paul was born in 1945, and he was always one to push the limits. That's why I tell the story that he was, I can remember his birthday, 5-4-4-5, same frontwards and backwards, okay? And that was 2 days before Germany surrendered in World War II. And I like to tell people that it took a couple days before the news got over there that Paul Ritzman had arrived. But as soon as they found out, they quit. They said, but that's the kind of guy he was and is. And he has, this isn't a plug, but he still has the muffler shop there at Loyal Oak. Good guy. Really like Paul. And then in February of 47, I was born. Dad's still working downtown Akron, and in those days, those stores stayed open for me. They opened at 8
to 10.
8 in the morning till 10 at night, and he would work full shifts. They would work full shifts. So Mom and the kids were home by themselves a lot. So in
The Home Alone movies.
Yeah, the Home Alone movies. January 29th of 1950, Brother Eric was born. And so there's 18 years difference between Walt and Eric. Well, he was born on January 29th of 1950. On March 5th, I think it was March 3rd or March 5th of 1950.
I don't remember.
Yeah, you don't remember that? So you're 4 or 5 weeks old. You're 5 or 6 weeks old, right? 8 kids in the house, the oldest in college, and Dad buys the store down here at 126 Main Street from the pharmacist at that time was Rohn, R-O-H-N. He had a house out on 261, it had the big white chimney on it with a red R or an R on it. Pardon?
Virginia.
Okay, okay, all right. So that's who Dad bought the pharmacy from. And the story is that Mom wasn't real enthusiastic about this with 8 kids at home, and he's going out on a new venture. And he said, Mom, and by that time, I don't know how they did it during those years, had paid for their house there in Clubside Drive. He says, Mom, we're going to mortgage the house. We worked hard for this house, and now we're going to make it work hard for us. And that's what they did. So it's where the brewery is now, down at Main Street on 126 Main is where that was. Little 1,300 square foot store. And some of the pharmacists that worked there with Dad before the brothers started working for him were Ross Klutzley. I don't know if anybody recalls that name. And then there was also a Charlie Pritchard worked with him a number of years. So at that store, then, we had the soda fountain. And a lot of these pictures are over here too that you're welcome to look at later. But this is an actual picture of this soda fountain. This is Susie Olam and Betty Kemp. And this would have been probably in the early 50s. And this 54. So this would have been, and at that little soda fountain in the mornings, there would people like Homer Liebert, Fiscus from Fiscus Motors, I think he had the Pontiac dealership. People like Curtis from Curtis Menswear, Earl Gottwalt. Those folks would come in, have coffee in the morning, and kind of have a little, solve all the problems of that time before they would head to work. But they would serve hamburgers. Mom would make big pots of soup or chili to send out there for Dad to sell and that type of thing. And that's a picture of the soda fountain that was actually in that store at 126 Main. This was one of the window displays there. This is a picture of Dad at that store at 126 Main. I recognize the shelves because I think we might have had to clean them a few times. I think Dad would take us out there on Saturday mornings, and I think it was more to get out of Mom's hair for a while. But I remember cleaning those bottles and shelves, and fond memories of that. One of these pictures, and you can look at it more closely, and I don't think I have this on the screen, but this is another front window, and the front windows were kind of slanted in toward the door. This shows, this shows a reflection here of the corner business at the corner of Broad and Main. And at that time was Ladrick's shoe store. And I think that's a reflection of the Ladrick sign. If you look closely, I think that's what it is, a reflection of the Ladrick sign. This is a picture of Dad in the actual store there at 126 Main. This was this was not at 126 Main. This was at one of the pharmacies in downtown Akron. This was again probably a one in the downtown Akron in the 40s, and you can tell by his hair color. This was the actual prescription room at 126 Main. All the prescription items. This right here was a big rack of Rit dye, wasn't it, Eric?
Yeah.
All different colors of Rit dye that people would do to dye their fabric with and so forth. I think this was what was the brand of typewriter, Eric?
Olympia?
It was Olympia or something like that, and it felt like you had to almost hit the things with a hammer to get it to type. But that was the equipment. You had a counting tray, you had a typewriter, and you had some labels, and you had your medications and a bunch of crude drugs or powders and solutions and so forth to make up these prescriptions. But that was the actual prescription counter in the prescription room at 126 Main. These and a numbering machine, yeah, that would sequentially number the prescriptions. I think that's it right here. It's called a Bates numbering machine. All of these medications back here were over-the-counter medications, but there was no self-service until the late 50s or early 60s. And so people would come to the counter and say, I want a bottle of Pepto-Bismol, or I need some Bayer aspirin, or what. And the clerk would get those, and a lot of times wrap them, not bag them. They would wrap them in green paper and either tie it with a string or use the tape to tape them up. And there were drawers that you can't see here that they also stored things in alphabetically, if I remember right. But then he changed to self-service, probably would have been in the late 50s, I think, But that's original there.
When did they remove the
Soda fountain. The soda fountain, I think, was
62
four-
or
six-
4, something.
I think it was in '64 that they removed the soda fountain, which was along it was in the back right part of the store when you went in. That was removed there. A lot of people mentioned going to that soda fountain, coming over from the high school for lunch and things like that, using the soda fountain and so forth.
Tell them about the, who was it, the barista up at...
Yeah, and I had asked Jim Rivers to be here tonight. Jim's father cleaned the store for Dad on the weekends. Jim's father, I can't remember his name. Jim, okay. He was the janitor at the high school, right? He was the janitor at the high school, and Dad had him, gave him a key, and he came in and would clean the store out on the weekends, even at night, I think. And I was talking to Jim when we opened up our latest location here, where we are now, and Jim was in that day, and he said, and we were reminiscing about the soda fountain girls and that type of thing, and how nice that was to have the soda fountain. Jim said, and he'll back me up on this, but I was hoping that he'd be here to tell the story. He said, yes, he says, my family and we ate a lot of sandwiches at that soda fountain. And I said, yeah, that was really great, and some other comments. And he said, no. He said, you don't understand. He said, that's the only place that would serve us in the early 50s. So, thanks for reminding.
I think there were two black families in Wadsworth in the 50s and 60s, the Howards,
right,
and
yeah,
the Rivers.
Webb Howard, and
yeah, Wilbur Howard. I don't know if anybody remembers him. Was an entertainer, a great pianist, and played in a lot of
different clubs
and around Akron and so on, and they both were real good customers at the store. And,
he was the one who coined the word bebop.
Is that right?
1943.
Is that
Webb
right?
Howard, yeah.
Wib. They call him Wib.
Another interesting story about the 50s, and I don't mean to take up a lot of time, but Dad always liked to tell the story about there were a lot of guys that worked at the Wadsworth Foundry, and they would come up on Friday night and cash their check. And the one guy was Willie Hightower, and he would come in every Friday night and cash his check, and Dad did that for several people because he knew them and there was no problem. Well, one time, Willie Hightower came in, and there was another guy with him that Dad had never met. And so Mr. Hightower asked Mr. Ritzman if he would cash his friend's check, who had started to work down at the foundry. And Dad said, well, yeah, if you vouch for him, I don't have any problem doing that. He says, all you have to do is just, sign the back, and I'll cash the check. So he turned the check over, turned it back, and handed him the pencil, and this gentleman kind of fumbled around, and he finally says, he says, I'm pretty much used to handling an air hammer. I don't know how to handle one of these things. So Dad said, just put your X there and we're good to go. So, but that's kind of the relationships that he built. And I think, Eric, we still have people today mention how Dad could remember people's names after meeting them one time. He would remember their name and built those relationships. And that's really one of the foundations of what Ritzman Pharmacy built upon. So this was Dad at that location. There's some other interesting things. As we were going through the office a couple years ago and cleaning out some closets, I came across an old prescription file that Dad must have brought from downtown Akron, because most of these prescriptions, you can see the Portage Hotel, he may have worked there and brought this with him. And this is February 12th of 1918, okay? And these are prescriptions where this guy's using tincture of iodine and some type of inhalant by Park Davis Labs, and they used 10 drops of iodine and 2 ounces of, I don't know what it is, some type of inhalant, and they're just saying use as directed. And they charged the ridiculous price of 50 cents. I mean, that was outrageous. Here's another one from the Akron Pharmacy Company at the Portage Hotel. That was a 24-hour pharmacy. And this medication here, alcohol, you'll still find it on the shelf. It's used a lot of times as a nasal rinse to get rid of a lot of mucus and so forth. But it's still used. Alcohol is still used at this time. That was a 60 center, right. This is potassium iodide solution, saturated, you put it in water, 10 drops. Says 10 drops, GTT, drops 10 in water 3 times a day. And you drink that, and that would work as an expectorant to get rid of a lot of mucus in your lungs if you had a condition like that. Here's another potassium iodide. I don't know what all they're doing there. They're using it after meals for something. Yeah. Yes, sir. Yeah.
How did you learn how to read that stuff?
You know, yeah, because I write like that. Yeah. Fortunately, it's not trial and error on your patients. No. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You talk about all that mucus, all these prescriptions for mucus.
Yeah.
Think about it. It's an industrial growth
Right.
station in Akron.
Right.
All the shops.
Yep.
All that dirt.
And you've got the injector, you've got the match. Yeah.
I mean, I went to school in Akron, and I was on the 5th floor at City Hospital, if you dusted in the morning, and the window was up with a screen in it, by the time you came back, the top of the
Yeah.
was black.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's why they had a lot of ear, nose, and throat docs. What am I doing here? Okay, potassium iodide. This is another prescription from down there on February 12th. This is menthol camphor and chloral hydrate for external use. Here's another menthol. Dr. Mather, he was a ear, nose, and throat guy. This was very interesting, and I did check this out. This again was from, is there a date on here? It was in that file, so it was in that period of time. Second National Building, and he has his residence on Bookdale Avenue. And you see Robert H. Smith, M.D. Any idea who that might be? Pardon? Yeah, Dr. Bob. I think that was Dr. Bob. I checked that out. He was in the Second National Building. And that particular compound there that they were using was probably used in the specialty that he practiced. Now they would call it gastrointestinal specialist. I think at that time they probably called it a proctologist. So, but anyway.
So did you come across any of his recipes as such? We have some of the Blau recipes from Blau Pharmacy in Wadsworth, and it lists all the components that went in.
Of different compounds. We have not.
And then he bottled.
Yeah, we have not come across that. I don't know if we will or if they exist.
We ought to check the ones out for the Blau ones.
Yeah, that'd be interesting, yeah. Just some more particular prescriptions there. Terpen hydrate and codeine, better known as GI Gin. And then I thought it was interesting too, and this has to do with art, and we'll get back to the history, but these are some medications that were marketed and then taken off the market. This one from 1998 to 2001. Baycol was one of the first anti-cholesterol or cholesterol lowering drugs, but it caused some really severe muscle problems. Bextra was anti-inflammatory, and it caused some what they said some adverse effects like death and stuff like that. So they took it off the market. Yeah. Anybody ever remember Darvocet? I mean, if Darvon and Darvocet, if we didn't have like 3 bottles of 500 in the pharmacy, you think you were going to run out. But then that was taken off the market too. And you must remember that all these things that we're talking about that were taken off the market were the things that I was telling you back in the 70s, oh, it's safe, it's okay to take. And this was diethylstilbestrol, which was taken off. It was used for premature labor and other things like that. And it showed that it caused problems with cancer in the people that took it, and then even skipped a generation, I think. Stilbester was on the market for 31 years from 1940 to 1971. Quaalude, everybody remember Ludes? You know, those got real popular. Sleeping pill that hit the streets pretty heavy. It was manufactured under several different names, but was taken off the market. Here's a good one. See how good this guy feels after he slept. He really slept great. Now he's after his Quaalude, and he's. I don't know if he's still under the influence of it or he's rested. But these were some of the ads. This goes back further than that, but boy, this makes a lot of sense. Asthma cigarettes. You know, you breathe this stuff in and it's going to relax your lungs. I don't know. Yeah. And biphetamine, which was, what were the 2 things in that, Eric?
I think it's amphetamine and dextroamphetamine.
Yeah, 2 forms of amphetamine in one. Two mints in one. Yeah, and it was used for, you know, did you have that, are you a victim of overeating and oversitting? Well, we'll just give you some speed, and then you'll be good. These were what they called black beauties. They were a black capsule. And boy, they were popular in the drug culture, the black beauties.
What was in them?
Amphetamines. It was like speed. It was approved for weight control, or all-nighters, one of the two. I don't know.
Make sure you take it 10 to 14 hours before retirement.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. One of the unapproved uses of that was for all-nighters in college. Right. And of course, why is this woman so tired? Well, because she's overworked and she's emotionally done in, and it says down below here, dexedrine, which is speed, dextroamphetamine, will give them a feeling of energy and well-being, renewing their interest in life and living. Yeah, it's really good stuff. Yeah, but that's what we used. So a little bit back to Ritzman Pharmacy. Let's just go back here. Walt went to college when? In 52 or 50 through 53?
He graduated in 53.
He graduated in 1953. Right. He got out when he was young, and then he went to the Army. Mm-hmm. And then Walt, when he got out of the Army, and this is Walter here, he opened a store in the east side of Barberton, over behind the hospital, in 1957. Earl got out of pharmacy school in 1959. Is that correct, Eric? And so at that time, then he went to work for Dad. And he worked for Dad here in Wadsworth. And a lot of you folks remember Earl, or some of you folks remember Earl. And this is Earl here. He was born in 37. He worked for our dad until Dad passed away at 60 years old in 1966, in the fall of 1966. So Dad was just 60 years old and had a heart attack. He had a history of diabetes. and I think he had a heart condition secondary to that. Earl was working for him, and so then when Dad passed away, Earl purchased the store from his estate, purchased it from Mom, and then took over the store here at 126 Main. Bob got out of school in 1965 and then opened a pharmacy in West Akron over near Buchtel High School in 1968. Okay? Then in 1970, I graduated from pharmacy school. And in 1972, I went to work for Earl and Bob, splitting my time between them, the two of them. Eric graduated in 1973, right? From Northern. And so, and it was in about 74 or 75, wasn't it, that you and I and Earl and Bob formed a company to service nursing homes. And so it was, and we ran that out of the store in Akron. So there was the Barberton Pharmacy, there was the Wadsworth Pharmacy. It went by Wadsworth Pharmacy at that time. Ritzman Pharmacy was Walt's Pharmacy in the east side of Barberton. Then there was Bob's store in Akron over near Buchtel High School was Robert's Pharmacy. And then we had that nursing home corporation that we ran out of the Barberton or Akron store until we opened a store in Rittman in 1984, I think it was.
Was it that late?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
Or
I thought it was in the 70s.
no, it was because so we had the 4 different corporations, and then about that time is when Earl had okay, let me think here. All right. Before 1984, Earl had in 1983, or no, in the late 80s, Earl went together with a partner and purchased Elsis Ben Franklin. He purchased Elsis Ben Franklin, and they were up well, they actually were on High Street at that time in the new building. And so he moved the pharmacy into the Ben Franklin building, okay?
In
81, right, in 81. And so they were up there for a while. Then in 83, that's right it was, in 1983 is when we opened a store in Rittman. The 4 brothers in that separate corporation. Larry Flagger, who many of you remember, who was on the library board for a number of years, Earl and he went into partnership at the Ben Franklin store. Okay, so there's still those 4 corporations, and this is the first non-family member that was part of the ownership of Ritzman Pharmacies. Well, we had the 4 different companies. We found out that our brother Earl had a condition that was kind of limited his future. He had esophageal and pancreatic cancer, and we knew what was going to, he pretty well knew that he had a window of opportunity of maybe 5 to 7 years. And we know what happened when somebody passes away and there's nobody there to take care of that business. The value of the business and the vitality of the business just goes downhill very quickly. And so we were concerned about his family. He had 2 children and a wife. Earl was under 50 years old. And so we said, you know, we've got to do something here. So we put all 4 of those companies together and changed the name to Ritzman Pharmacies. So in '84, that's when Ritzman Pharmacies was born. And so the partners in that were Earl, Walt, Bob, Larry, Eric, and me. We're the 5 partners. And what we did then is knowing what was going to happen over the years, whether we expected it or not, that people were going to pass away or going to want to retire. And so what we did is we wrote, as soon as we put that corporation together, we made agreements that said if any one of us, if Eric, me, any of the brothers, if you die, if you're disabled, or you retire, you have to, your family can't hold the stock anymore. You have to sell the stock back to the family, or back to the company. So you're obligated to do that, and the company is obligated to buy it. So it was a two-way thing, and the value was set. We had a formula what the value, so there wouldn't be a bunch of arguments when that time came. And that is the main motive. The main motivator was because we wanted to take care of the family. We wanted to take care of Earl's family, and it worked for, well, it worked for Dad. It worked for our mom without even knowing it when Earl bought the pharmacy from Dad's estate. It worked for Earl, it worked for Bob, it worked for Larry, it worked for Walt when he retired, it working for Eric and I as we retired. So that was the motivation. There were other reasons to do it too. We could buy better, we could consolidate some of our administrative functions and so forth. But that's why we started the main motivator for putting Ritzman pharmacies together. I don't know if you have anything else to add there, Eric.
No, you covered it pretty well.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I
I think Earl was probably the one that really pushed us to do that, to form one corporation. And we spent many long hours. Well, at that time, the stores were open 9 to 9, and we would either have meetings before 9 a.m. or after 9 p.m. And lawyers and accountants and so on. I can remember having meetings. What's the hotel across from Summit Mall? We'd start at 10 at night. There were many nights we didn't get home till 2 or 3 in the morning, and somebody had to open at 9 the next morning.
Yeah.
But I think Earl was the motivator for forming the one corporation.
Yeah, Tom.
You guys are all retiring. Who's left? I mean, what's the family?
Okay, I still have some ownership in the business.
Okay.
And right, and I was just going to mention that in, I forget when it was, 85 or 6 or something, we brought on another non-family member partner who is now the CEO, who is now the chairman of the board and the CEO. So I'm still involved and have some ownership in there. So that's where we are now. Yeah.
Can you name on your hand where all the stores are located today?
No, I can't. Because then one of the other events was that we added the store at Akron City Hospital, Norton. We were in Hudson for a while, closed that store. We did Ritzman, we did Seville. We added the Seville store. And then it was in 20, what was that, 5 or 6 years ago, that we had the opportunity to purchase the Bueller's pharmacies. 2011. The Bueller's pharmacies. They were wanting to get out of the pharmacy business. So Eric Graff, our CEO and one of our partners, had worked for them when he was first out of school and had kept in touch with the Bueller brothers. And we caught wind of their, they were wanting to get out of they didn't have the people to support the pharmacy business. And so we started talks with them, and it turned out that we bought their pharmacies, and now we lease space from them in their stores. So we're tenants there running our pharmacies there. So that doubled our size to like 21 stores. Yeah, we went from 10 to 21 locations then. And then it was 2 years after that, 2 or 3 years after that, we had the opportunity to purchase Mast pharmacies down in Amish country. They had a store in downtown Worcester, Shreve, Millersburg, Berlin and Sugar Creek. Okay, thanks. I'm trying to put those. So that kind of names all of the, the locations, some of the Bueller stores.
No idea.
Yeah, the Bueller stores and that type of thing. So, yeah.
They still have one soda fountain.
We still have one soda fountain in Berlin.
It's
Right.
wonderful.
Yeah, right.
It's worth the trip.
Right, it is. Yeah. Yeah, in Berlin. Yeah. Don't step in the horse exhaust, whatever you do. Yeah. The places you go out there and there are just like 20 or 30 buggies parked across the parking lot. So that's kind of the history of where we are. I'm open to any other questions or comments. Maggie.
Yes, sir. Down in Berlin, are there any different prescriptions that are ordered down there for the Amish? That
We do some compounding down there, but not as much as you would think. The Amish community can be pretty good. They use medication. They don't, and they use conventional modern medications. A lot of the things that we do there are for some of their animals. Not a lot. The one thing that really surprised me is we were making up a poison ivy liquid that used 3 or 4 different ingredients that you would take orally to help prevent or treat poison ivy. But we ran into some approval difficulties with the State Board of Pharmacy and the FDA. The former owner of those stores was doing that stuff and could probably get away with it because he wasn't, he didn't have the exposure. But the stuff worked. This stuff worked. And it had a pretty good amount of alcohol in it too. That may have been some of the attraction. But the thing that really got me is that in the spring, and then I'll get to more questions, but in the spring, talking about down in Amish country, Maggie, in the spring and in the fall, when the Amish guys are working their horses really hard, they get dehydrated. And what it would be lactated ringer solution is an IV that they would use to give to their horses to get them hydrated again. Okay? Well, this stuff got to be terribly expensive to buy it from the manufacturer in an IV bag. And so the guy that owned the stores before us, he somehow figured out what are the powdered raw ingredients that go into make this lactated ringer solution to give the horse the IV. And so he would make it up in big jars, just the powder, and sell it to the Amish guys. They would dump it in a 5-gallon bucket, pour water in, dissolve it, and give the horse the IV. Not filtered, not sterilized, anything. And so, we were a little concerned about that, killing some guy's big workhorse. And we checked it out, and they said, if you sell it to either the vet, you sell it to the vet, and then the vet does that IV, or the vet tells the guy to do it, our liability was covered. So they're still using it. I think we're still making that stuff. So, but it's probably not the safest. But
So what's the delivery? They drink it?
No, they put it in an IV. They stick them.
An IV in that?
Yeah.
Shoot it in
So that's where they get that term. Is it strong enough to kill a horse? I don't know. But yeah, Caesar.
There used to be only one compounding drugstore in Suffolk and Medina County. Why is that, and why? I'm really surprised that Ritzman would not have picked up on that.
We had a compounding pharmacy in Hudson, okay, and we did a lot of and actually then down at across from Akron City Hospital, we had a pharmacy that only did compounding. Well, because we had so many locations, we had all the contracts with all the insurers and pharmacy benefit managers, okay? Most compounding pharmacies will not bill your insurance. They'll say it's cash only. So, which is fine, which is fine. But the contracts that we had, they said, look, you can't say to Caesar, look, Caesar, you have Aetna insurance, and if you get a regular medication, I'll bill your Aetna, but if you get a compound, I'm not going to accept Aetna.
That exact thing happened.
Yeah, that's the reason. And so it got to be so complicated, and the rules and some of the FDA regulations. We do a fair amount of compounding at our downtown Worcester location with natural hormone replacement therapy. But that's where we do most of the compounding there. Some in Berlin and a little bit in Sugar Creek. But most of it is in downtown Worcester with physicians that refer customers or patients to us there at our downtown Worcester store, which is right across from the library. Yes?
I think maybe why those 1918 prescriptions hung around is because that was when that flu was,
That-
and it was so bad. I lost an uncle.
Is that right?
one time, and I kind of bet they did a record amount. Of
I hadn't thought of that. I had
1918 was
the bit flu from after the war. Yeah,
20,000.
yeah, yeah.
Also, the dust in Akron was probably from the coal burning
Mm-hmm.
factories. And do you still do nursing home?
We do not.
You've gone now that.
We do not. Right. Yeah, that business has changed dramatically.
And you didn't mention that your sisters were nurses.
Both of our sisters were nurses, and they still are. Right.
I got to know your mom and them very well because my mom was at Apostolic
Okay.
15 years.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
your mom was a sweet, sweet
Yeah.
lady.
Yeah. You know, and a lot of people will say to me and Eric that say, "Boy, your dad would really be proud of you to see what the business is today." And I think that he would be, but I think he would be more proud of the fact of the people that we have working with us and the way that our people treat our patients and customers. I think he would be more satisfied with that than the size of our organization. And I also say, a lot of people say, well, how could you 5 brothers get along together in business? Well, I think by the time we put everything together, the pecking order had pretty well been established. Walt treated Eric and I more like a father than an older brother. And we caught our share of flack through the years. And so we kind of knew our place. So the pecking order was pretty well established. But I think one of the reasons we were able to get along so well, too, was Mom's influence more than anything. Because she would always say, now look, don't any one of you, or she'd tell us individually, don't think more of yourself than you think you are, and don't try and be, too high and mighty or things like that. So I think that was a bigger influence on us getting along than Dad was. But they were both good influences here, I believe. Yeah, Chip.
You mentioned earlier about your dad knowing the guys' names after the first time.
Yes.
They still carry that on in the stores.
Is that right? Yeah, yeah.
I know about 6 stores I've looked through.
Right.
That I'm amazed. I walk in there and they know her name,
Yeah.
her name.
Yeah.
And it's like, good thing I wasn't stuck in the store.
Right. One of the, and we're running out of time here, and I don't want to, but that's kind of the history of it. Some big events that in the life of Ritzman Pharmacies was, in 1999, we were just pretty much like any other pharmacy. And at that time, we said, well, we are going to try and blend vitamin, minerals, and health, vitamin, mineral, and health supplements into to work along with the medications that are prescribed by your physicians. And that's when we got into some natural products, homeopathy. We developed our own line of supplements, vitamins, and minerals. And that really differentiated us starting in 1999. Ritzman's, fortunately, due to our leadership, and I'm not saying me, but due to our leadership, was able to differentiate ourselves and stay in the game. That kept us in the game for the next 8 to 10 years. because we were one of the first to do that. 5 or 6 years after that, some of the other big players started to do that too, and now it's pretty much a commonplace. But we still lean heavily on our pharmacists working with patients for non-prescription medications to go along with or enhance the medications that they're using that are prescribed by their physicians too. So that was a big event. The Bueller's acquisition was a big event that gave us some more momentum. The MAST was too, and some of the things that we're doing now will help continue to propel us, I believe, too. Other questions or comments?
We're fortunate to have you here.
Well, we appreciate that, yeah. Well, the communities have supported us tremendously, and we have, we really have some great individuals working for us. That, I like to think that our, a number of our pharmacists, many of them, and many of the people that aren't the pharmacists that work in the stores, they're part of the community, they know the people, and many of them, this isn't a negative thing. I think that they feel that pharmacy or the job that they're working in is not the be-all, end-all, but it's a platform for them to do the things that they feel that they need to do in the community and with the people that they come in contact with. This is a vehicle for them to treat people the way that people should be treated and cared for. And so, you remember, you mentioned quickly about remembering names, and Dad told me one time the way that he did that is that when he would meet somebody and get their name, that he would actually write it down 3 times and say it. And that was his trick at remembering people's names. But I think it was also his interest in, genuine interest in the people that he met and take care of. So, yes, Caesar.
Something that you did not say that you probably would not say in a public forum is this, but I'll say it for you. When I was mayor, we had one of the other drug firms within Wadsworth that doesn't necessarily sell drugs only, sells a lot of other things, cars and everything else, and you know what I'm talking about probably. We're giving free drugs to poor people.
Mm-hmm.
Ritzman Pharmacy, during my 4 years as mayor, gave more free drugs to poor people than that store did in the entire year.
Well, I was not aware of that. Yeah. Earl, Earl, go ahead, Eric.
No, I just thank
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
Caesar, for that.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, Earl, who was here in Wadsworth, he was, I think, the guy that had most ability of any of us, and people thought of him, not only as their pharmacist, but they trusted him. They thought of him as a friend. He was just a real top-notch guy. Yeah. You're welcome to look at those write-ups too. Now, Eric and I have not qualified yet for one of those, and we want to kind of delay that for a while, Eric?
Right.
Yeah, okay, all right. That's why we're not up here. Okay.
And speaking,
Pardon?
We voted a bronze bust for you.
Oh, okay, Woody, yeah. Joe?
So looking ahead, what do you think in the whole pharmacy business is your greatest strength and your greatest challenge?
Our greatest strength, I believe, Eric,
it's the people we have.
Yeah.
It's the people that take care of people.
Yeah.
You can't find that in most places. You can't find anybody to help you in most places.
And it's,
I had a conversation that what you look for in pharmacists is a personality.
right, yeah.
They have to have the knowledge.
Yeah, right.
They have to have the personality.
Yeah.
To deal with people.
Yeah.
before they're getting considered.
Yeah, that just gets you in the door, the knowledge. And it's the relationships that they build. People trust these not only the pharmacists, but the other individual stores. The biggest challenge that we have is dealing with the changing healthcare market with the big guys getting bigger and the need to get more efficient. The smaller operators being excluded from insurance networks, where an insurance provider will say, okay, we're going to insure this 100,000 people, and in order for us to get a better rate, we're going to exclude some of the, we're going to say not all the pharmacies in this community can fill their prescriptions, and they kind of put it out for bid. And so they're narrowing networks or they're excluding networks, and that's a big challenge. Yeah, there's preferred and narrow networks.
This might not be proper, but I'm going to ask you, what do you think of this issue too?
I don't know if I'm permitted to comment on that in this forum. But
Hey, it's a
okay.
free country.
Okay. The idea behind issue 2 on a high level may be good. The way the law is written is, I don't know how it would ever be implemented. I do not know how it would be implemented. And the one big drawback about it is, well, there's a couple big drawbacks. They say they're only going to pay what the VA pays. Well, number one, there's no way to find out what the VA pays. And number two, the state of Ohio may be paying less than on some things than the VA is paying. There are medications that the state of Ohio pays for that the VA doesn't even use for infants, children, and younger people. So, and then the other really the thing that gets it, that in that law, in that actual act, which I wanted to go to the source and I read it, there's a provision in there that if somebody brings suit against the act after it's implemented to say it's illegal or whatever, if somebody sues against that act, the organization that put it on the ballot is the one to defend it, and the state of Ohio has to pay their lawyers. Yeah. It sounds like a no, yeah. Sounds like a no. Yeah.
One thing, not to drag this on. I gave him a road trip down to Berlin. But what about the store up there at Ritztown?
Oh yes, I'm sorry about that. That's our new pharmacy of the future at the that we're in partnership with Neomed, Northeast Ohio Medical College. We have a new pharmacy there. I don't know if I have a picture of it here or not.
It's worth driving to.
Oh, I'm going the wrong way here. Let's keep going there.
While he's looking for that, I just I don't know what reminded me of it, but our brother Earl was a pilot, of course. People that knew him knew he loved to fly, and he also was the one that originated the Wadsworth Fly Days. And the balloon. If I'm not mistaken, Caesar, isn't that correct? Him and his committee originated the balloon fly days, and I forget the exact title of it. Not balloon race, but.
Matter of fact, he was the first one to get me to narrate the thing.
Yeah.
Is that right?
I narrated for several years.
Yeah. This is a picture of our pharmacy at Northeast Ohio University College of Medicine, where our pharmacist is back here. You see no production. It's back in its own lab. This is an area that patients can sit. There's a concierge desk up here. We have a lot of natural products and vitamin mineral health supplements and that type of thing too. So we're in partnership with Northeast Ohio University College of Medicine on that. It's just, yeah. So that's it. And we're running out of time, but I'll stick around, whatever. I know they want to get out at 9 o'clock. Any others? Appreciate your opportunity. Eric, thanks.